Welcome to the 3Haunted podcast, where we bring you all things horror, supernatural, folklore, mythology, and all things that go bump in the night.
Hey guys, this is your co-host Ashley Lunar Goddess, Gorilla Girl filmmaker and horror-loving cinephile. I'm just your average pun-making swearwolf that loves to explore the spookier things in life.
Hey everybody, I'm John Thomas, paranormal investigator, super smartass, and film lover extraordinaire.
What's up, ghouls, gals, and all of my fellow creatures of the night? In today's episode, we'll be talking about obscure vampire films. What makes some of these films so bad they're good? Are these films worth watching? Join us along with our special guests as we sink our teeth into the subject.
But first, a word from our network sponsor.
Are you looking for more awesome podcasts? Head on over to withoutyourhead.com for access to the Without Your Head podcast network, where you'll find a variety of podcasts sure to keep you entertained and coming back for more. And who's ready to have a bloody good time? All right, bring us back, John.
All the blood everywhere. Welcome back, everybody. Tonight we have James and Nathan returning to come and talk to us about these funky-ass vampire films.
Oh, yeah.
Woohoo! Welcome back, James.
Hey.
Awesome upcoming film Abigail, and Nathan, awesome film Headless. Actually, really disturbing fucking film. I watched it, by the way. Headless.
Nice.
Two of my favorite
Very
filmmakers on here, so very happy to be talking spooky vampire films that are obscure and a little bit fucked up on an awesome spooky night. So, welcome, boys.
Hi.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, thanks for having me.
Yeah. We all know that this is like my favorite topic, vampires. And actually, this is Nathan's idea because he knows I love vampires. And he's like, we should totally do an episode on obscure vampire films. And I'm like, I am here for it. I have a whole list. So my question, though, starting off for all of you guys is what makes a vampire film obscure versus not obscure, I guess?
Oh, that's a good question.
Just jumping off, I think that although neither of these films are obscure at this point, I think the best example would probably be comparing Lost Boys to Near Dark.
That's a great comparison. Near Dark was the first thing I thought of as obscure.
Yeah, totally. It got eclipsed by the other. They both have wonderful moments. They're actually opposite sides of the same coin, and they do the opposite things with vampires. Lost Boys plays it all on the surface. It's all very glamorous. It's all fangs and bat noises and stakings. And in Near Dark, it's like almost a revisionist Western, and they don't use the word vampire, and they're not glamorous, but they both work really well, and they're both really valid films. And so it's hard to, I always champion Near Dark because it's more underrated, and so I guess more obscure. Although, that doesn't take away my love for Lost Boys, but I feel like that might be a really good starting point just because it's like, man, both those movies are totally great, and in neither of those cases are we talking about so bad they're good. We're talking about how so good they're great. So yeah, and I don't know what that made it. I don't know if it was because it wasn't, Near Dark wasn't as pop as Lost Boys. It wasn't kind of as rock and roll, but they're both really great. But man, if you haven't seen Near Dark, go start there.
Yeah, no, I just piggybacking off of what Nathan said. I think like if we're looking at the essence of what an obscure vampire film would be versus a non-obscure vampire film, I think he kind of hit it right on the head where we're talking really about box office and just general reach in the pop zeitgeist, if you will. I mean, The Lost Boys, everybody knows The Lost Boys. Like it's in the horror movie vernacular. Like it's right up there with everything else, like whether it's Jason or whatever. It's one of the best well-known vampire films out there. Whereas Near Dark like really flew under the radar, and even like when it got a resurgence through DVD, there was like a really nice special edition that came out a few 20 years back now, I guess, but it still didn't have the reach. Like not as many people still didn't know what it was, and it's never really had the traction that The Lost Boys got, which I think kind of made it kind of dwindle into obscurity. But it is one of those gems where it's like it's obscure, but it's just awesome. It's a fantastic movie.
And it's really strange with that film because It's directed by Catherine Bigelow. It was made when Catherine Bigelow was working with and still dating James Cameron, so it borrows some of his cast from Aliens. It's maybe Bill Paxton's best role, if not one of the best. It's so great, and it's so deserving of big attention, I think. But yeah, so I think going from that, it really is the reach in the box office, because, man, that's a great movie that just happened to stay under the radar. And even today, it's more known, I think, than it has been, but some people haven't seen it.
Yeah, I did search, just like Google search of obscure unknown vampire films and like underground vampire films, just to see what's listed out there. And it's so interesting, some of these lists that I wouldn't necessarily classify as obscure or under, I don't know, because I think I saw 30 Days of Night pop up on one list, and I'm like, that is not an obscure vampire film to me. I feel like that was in the box office, that was pretty well known, and that still has a pretty big following, so I wouldn't necessarily categorize that as obscure. But I don't know. I started watching lists. I actually put it out on my Facebook. People give me some vampire films that you think I might not have watched. And I have to say there were two that I started to watch. I just couldn't get through. It was Billy the Kid versus Dracula. And actually it was Kronos.
Captain Kronos?
I was having a really hard time with Captain Kronos.
You know, Captain Kronos is an interesting one. It's part of what they call the Karnstein trilogy, because there was like Twins of Evil. I think The Vampire Lovers was one of the other ones. But it's really obscure in that it's like so disjointed from the rest of Hammer's vampire films. It's got a very different vibe to it. The vampires behave very differently than the other Hammer films. And it was toward the end of Hammer's life, so they were kind of like not giving nearly as much of a fuck about what they were putting out. Like Captain Kronos was within a couple of years of Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires, which is one of my favorite vampire movies because it combines kung fu and vampires, and I love kung fu films, so I don't care. But yeah, no, like toward the end, Hammer was just like, whatever, man, we just got to get this stuff out so we can make some money because we're drowning here.
Yeah, that one is the one I was just like, I can't do it. I was trying really hard because like I can watch some really odd, or not, I shouldn't say odd. I can watch some really abstract vampire type films and be like, yeah, I'm for this. I'm doing it. I'm feeling it. But with those two, I was just like, holy hell, make it stop.
I mean, Billy the Kid versus Dracula is a lot more mystery science theater / horror host fare. I think that it works well with some satire and maybe some mental stimulants or
get high
mental altering substances to go along with it. You watch it at midnight.
Yeah, I could see that being a good film for like having fun with it.
And it makes a good pair with Jesse James meets Frankenstein's daughter.
Yeah, or
you've done this before.
Even the more popular stuff, like an Abbott and Costello meet the Wolfman or something like that would be that. I feel like that would all be in the same corner. You know what I mean?
Oh, we got to run back. First of all, it is Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein, and that movie is an A+. That is a movie that is as funny as Young Frankenstein is today.
I apologize, sir. I apologize. I'm very tired.
No, I'm going to jump through that screen. We're going to no, I'm kidding.
We're going to tussle. Uh-oh.
Abbott and
It's
Costello
our first
meet
3Haunted
the film geeks. You know, I don't know. No, because I think that if you want to talk underrated, not obscure, but underrated, Bela Lugosi's performance as Dracula in Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein is a tour de force. I think that movie's great because they don't count the monsters as jokes. But, you know, it's less of a vampire film than more of a Bela Lugosi just being a badass against Abbott and Costello sort of film.
Yeah.
I did a rewatch of Vamp. No, I'm sorry, not Vamp.
Oh,
Vamp.
With Grace Jones and
I did a rewatch of that one.
Yeah.
Robert Russler,
Getty Watanabe.
Yeah. To me, I would kind of categorize that as obscure. Most people don't know that film. I forgot how much I enjoyed that film for it being weird and like can we just talk about her main dance that she does? I'm just like, what the fuck is going on here? And I've already seen this, and it's like each time, you know, these guys are like, oh yeah, I'm about it. This is awesome. And I'm thinking, what is this? But it works, I guess. Like, she gives fake fellatio to a headless mannequin on stage. So, hey, run with it.
It was a really disjointed movie in that aspect, where it was like playing with some themes that felt a little odd, like Grace Jones, sex icon. To a lot of people, yes. To the crowd that she was playing to, not really. It didn't really add up. But the movie as a whole, I love it. I love Vamp so much. I would classify it as obscure too, because it doesn't really get talked about that much overall. But I do think it's a fantastic movie. I think it was a little bit ahead of its time.
Yes.
Because it was mixing in the horror and the comedy in the same kind of dry, satirical way that we got in stuff like Lost Boys Fright Night and stuff like that. I actually think it's after Fright Night, but
I was gonna say, I think it feels to me a little more. It's got a little more of that kind of artsy sort of thinking going on than Fright Night, and I think that maybe that's why it's not quite as pure of a horror comedy as Fright Night. It's very good. I like Grace Jones as the vampire because it reminds me very much of her contemporary David Bowie being a vampire in The Hunger.
Yes,
which is a great vampire film, not necessarily obscure, but maybe not talked about as much anymore as it should be. So I don't know. She worked for me as a vampire, but I would say that movie's fairly disjointed. I mean, I like it. It's a lot of fun, but that's a great thing about these movies is they're imperfect, but they still have cool things to offer.
Yeah, I mean, Vamp's working with a lot of conflicting themes, right? But there's also a lot of eye for detail in that movie too. Like when they go down in the thing and in the sewer and they're like going to kill her, and you see the sarcophagus like just chilling in the back where she sleeps, and you're like, you just get that like really immediate visual aid, like, holy shit, she is old. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
holy shit, she is
like just
old.
really, just that really like slick prop use, set dressing, and like that movie's full of it, and it's really like some really ingenious stuff. But the art, as a filmmaker, as an artist, I see like a lot of themes that just don't jive in the movie too. They're trying to be artsy in places where they shouldn't. They're trying to be funny in places where it might not have felt like it should have been funny. Like, it's not a perfect movie, but it is. I do enjoy it great. I do enjoy it quite a bit.
Yeah, I don't mind the combination of art and gore and horror and comedy. I think it can be done well, but man, that's putting so many layers together to try and meet a balance. It's hard enough when you just have two, right? Horror and comedy, and then we add in the artistic element. I feel like it landed for me because I wasn't sure how it was going to stand to the test of time. I haven't watched that in quite some time. So I was like, sure. Let me see, put it on, watch the whole thing. And I'm like, yup, still here for it. The dance was a little awkward, but that's just personal taste here. Taste. Sorry. Vampires. I make myself laugh, guys.
I got it.
The real question is, does that joke bite or suck?
Well played.
Kidding.
I thought they had fun with it. And that's the part I think is what keeps it on a lot of these films. I think that's what helped them stand the test of time, is the ones that aren't taking it so seriously, that do have fun poking at themselves. So then, decades later, they're having a little poking fun at themselves. And it's like, oh yeah, okay, that works. It alleviates some of the like criticism we may have for it, right? Or people that haven't seen it yet, because it's like, oh yeah, it's making fun of itself too. It works. I think it knows when not to make fun of itself and when to make fun of itself. So some of the moments with her being this, stripper, she comes out and it's like, they're really selling, I think, the androgyny there for a moment. And it works. And no one makes a comment. Like, they could have easily tried to slide in some audience reaction there from the strip club goers, but it wasn't. It's like they're all into it, they're all leaning into it, so it works. They know when to make the joke, for me at least, and when not to.
I mean, I think that she's just such a presence herself. I mean, she's so striking outside of vampire makeup, and it reminds me a lot of when you see a more modern underrated vampire film, Only Lovers Left Alive, and the two main vampires are Tom Hiddleston and Tilda Swinton. It's like, these are human beings who do not look like human beings. They look otherworldly to a point. And I mean, I think that's the same point with Bowie. And honestly, I mean, that's a great tradition anyway. I mean, you have actors like Max Schreck in Nosferatu. You know, he doesn't look like any human I've ever seen. And I've seen pictures of him out of the makeup, and they didn't have to do too much. You know, and even Lugosi's, you know, Lugosi's great. And there's a lot of pictures and times where Lugosi's crazy, handsome, and debonair and European, but there's also times that, look, it's like, yeah, he looks like a vampire. And so I really appreciate that about Grace Jones. I feel like they used her natural look and built off that really well. And then you pair that natural look with stuff like her being in a sarcophagus, and it's just like, oh, this is not like a vampire that I've ever seen, or at least not a vampire I've seen in a horror comedy.
You bringing up Max Schreck also made me think of another very obscure both actor and vampire film, Klaus Kinski in Nosferatu the Vampire. If you want to talk about obscure vampire movies, now this is a weird one.
I mean, who else to remake Nosferatu but Herzog and Kinski, man? I mean,
two complete madmen.
Yes. And then you have somebody, again, otherworldly beauty, Isabella Johnny in there as well. I think that's a great remake. I think it doesn't get talked about when people talk about remakes.
No, it really doesn't. And it's a fantastic film because of how bravely it just does whatever the hell it wants. It really does. Herzog did not give a shit directing that film, and it totally shines through. I know a lot of people that really just don't like it because it's just, they feel like it's just too much of everything. And I'm like, but that's what makes it so great, is that it's too much. Everybody in the movie's overacting. Everything, all the sets are just insane. The plague aspect, the rats everywhere. It's nuts. It's nuts. It's an amazing film.
And I would encourage anybody who thinks that movie is too much to watch the follow-up Nosferatu in Venice. Now that's a messed up movie where Kinski's back and he's grown his hair out and I'm playing a debonair madman who happens to be the same vampire, but I'm nothing like this vampire that I just played in a whole other movie. But I'm Kinski, so I can do what the hell I want. Herzog's Nosferatu is really great. It's very stylish. The soundtrack is haunting and weird and cool. And I don't know, it's just a really interesting pairing, again, of actor and role, because Kinski when he's firing on all cylinders. So it's not like a grandiose role, like Aguirre or something where he's like big and over the top. For playing a rodent-like vampire, it's one of his more subdued roles, I feel like.
It is, but there's also like very interesting moments in there where you get that moment where it's just where he is firing on all cylinders. When Harker, like that meeting, like when he's about to attack Harker, and it's just that whole build there, like he's insane. You look in his eyes and you're like, he's gonna eat that guy, like for real.
And I would believe that both of Orlok and of Kinski, really.
Yeah, exactly.
There is one artistic film. I don't know if you guys have had a chance to watch. Have you guys watched Blood yet?
I'm not familiar myself. No.
Please educate us.
So Blood it's a 2009 film, and it was, I don't even know how I stumbled across this one. I think it was like one of those late night on, some random premium channel, and they secured the late night spot. But I'm an insomniac, so I will watch all of those in the middle of the night. And it is basically, it's pretty obvious actually, that it's symbolistic of drug use and addiction. And actually, to get to the vampire world, so there's an actual world that you go into, that the vampires are able to come in and out of, but you can go into that world, is you basically smoke this red gem. And I'm assuming the gem is made out of some vampire blood, because it's like this dark red, glistening gem. And you've got this artist who, she's like, this guy comes into her gallery, ends up giving her this. She starts to have these dalliances with these vampires in the vampire world. And obviously there's sex included in this like blood transference. But it's interesting because it's aesthetically, it's shot very dark, very deep contrast, very what you would assume someone would visualize. This is an artsy vampire film. And then the vampire world feels like an Evanescence music video, with like the high glow and the black and white, almost like very low saturation. Just feels like an Evanescence video. With that said, I love the storyline and I love how dark they got with the vampire worlds, because even though these people are tripping into this world, you know, we're used to sexy vampires, right? Like in the 2000s and beyond, that was time for the sexy vampire. And yes, they're having sex with these vampires. The vampires themselves are really fucking disturbing looking. And I think that I really liked that they did that, because to me it hit it home a little more that, like, if we're symbolizing drug use, that to the drug user, they're in their high so much they don't realize like the magnitude of what they're actually using. Like what they're using is not this glamour, is not this beautiful thing that they're experiencing. They're actually essentially making love to a monster. And I really enjoyed it. Like, I am always telling people, if you're into vampire films, this is not one where I would say, oh guys, this is the best vampire film out like ever. But I will say this is one that resonated with me to the point where I still talk about it. So I would recommend it. And it's funny because it has like the lowest ratings. Like, I think it has like a 2.9 on IMDb and like 64% user rate on Google. And it's like, yes, I could see why people might feel that way, but I also think people don't necessarily like their horror to have, I guess, an obvious statement, for lack of a better word. I think some people really do look for meaningless horror, or I shouldn't say meaningless, because all horror has a meaning, right? They just don't always understand what's being told. So I think that with this one, it's like, okay, come on, we get it, mom. So, but I loved it, so I recommend it.
Drugs are bad.
What you said was blood gem, so we need to talk about subspecies.
Yeah.
Oh my God, yes.
That's something we got to talk about.
Yes, let's talk about subspecies.
For the uninitiated, Subspecies is a film that became a film series from our cheap friends at Full Moon, the poor man's trauma, if you will. Subspecies features a drooling, long-fingered vampire named Radu. His father, who is played by the tall man himself, Angus Shrim, in a huge white fright wig. He's got a mummy that's actually a mummy. And he's obsessed with the blood gem. And I don't know, it's kind of, in my opinion, the best of the Full Moon series. I know the Puppet Master people will come after me, but they're small, I can take them. But no, I think that the Subspecies films are pretty cool, and they're making a new one right now, which I think is really interesting and excellent. But yeah, I think that that's something that was a staple for some of us who were 90s video store kids. But I think it's a very underrated series, and really, again, it's one of the better things that Full Moon has had their hands on.
I think the thing that makes that such a good series is Ted Nicolau and what he did with the direction of that film and what he was doing with how little he had, and just some of the effect work and the shadow play of like how they worked Radu and how he appeared and disappeared and used the shadows to make that work, and just made him they made that movie feel so much bigger than it actually was in a lot of ways, in a lot of really like technically savvy ways that just really impressed me, even when I was like 10 years old. You know what I mean? Watching it for the first time, I was like, wow, this looks really cool. Because I was an avid Full Moon renter, and most of the movies kind of look like shit. So this to see that, and I mean, all the way up until Subspecies 3, like, you had that same quality of cinematography and effect work and everything. And it was really all Ted Nicolau and Anders Hof, obviously, maintaining that incredible performance as Radu. Yeah, no, I'm with him 100%. It might be obscure, but God, is Subspecies good. It is so good.
Yeah, and I mean, we talk about the vampire, and we've talked about vampires before, but like the actual looks of the vampires, like what are they selling to us in terms of this is what the creature looks like, this is your vampire for the next hour and a half or whatever. And like Subspecies really did a great job, in my opinion, with how they presented this is what a vampire is in our world. This is what they look like. And, you've got the long fingernails and the creepy claws, very Nosferatu-like, but the face, it just, I don't know. I really loved it to be able to, they're what nightmares are made of if you're going to have a nightmare about vampires, right? Like some of the vampires we've had out there, it's like, okay, yeah, you've got sharp teeth, but you're not that scary. I could take you.
Yeah, no,
but,
you're 100%
but like
right.
these guys, it's like, no, I would run like hell.
Hell yeah. It's just one of those movies. Like it's truly a masterpiece in a place where the masterpieces shouldn't exist. In a space where, Charlie Band, Empire, Full Moon, we're talking about like an assembly line churning them out movie studio. He's not really caring about the artistry, like excusing Stuart Gordon, everything Stuart Gordon did, because that's all amazing work. But everything else, everything that Charlie Band actually had his hands in, it was just like, get him out, get him out, get him out, get him out, get him on the video store shelf. Let's make some money. Let's make some money. What is it good? Who gives a shit? That doesn't matter.
Who gives a shit?
I'm not kidding. We're talking about the studio that made Puppet Master, which is a franchise and that I still don't understand how it exists.
You better watch yourself here.
I'm sorry. Beyond Puppet Master 1, I'm not a fan.
I like the gag.
Podcast idea, films we lie to ourselves about.
Puppet Masters is one of them.
Puppet Master is absolutely one of them. I feel like everything after Puppet Master 1, which did have a story behind it and actually had a script that could be followed in some way, shape, or form. It's just not good. I mean, but we're talking about the studio, like their bread and butter is the Puppet Master movies. Like they don't really care. Just not to be too mean, but it's the truth. They don't care. They just want to get the movies out and make them good. But then you have this gem, Subspecies, that it looks like people cared. It's kind of amazing.
So, speaking of obscure vampire films,
ooh, what do we have?
I would like to talk about My Best Friend as a Vampire.
I love that one.
And
I haven't watched it yet.
It does tie in, for me personally, to our good friend Warwick Davis, the Leprechaun, because I was supposed to go as a kid whenever this film came out, 1988, to go see Willow at a theater in my hometown of Muncie, Indiana, that had 2 screens. And the film strip for Willow was broken because this is way before DCP. And so I was with my grandma and she was like, well, let's go see this other movie. And it happened to be My Best Friend as a Vampire. For those who haven't seen My Best Friend as a Vampire, it is a coming of age comedy starring the Dead Poet Society's Robert Sean Leonard and Star Trek The Next Generation's Rene Auberjonois. I don't know how to pronounce his name. And the recently passed David Warner. And it's basically coming of age and also kind of quasi-gay teen comedy, but much more just a vampire sort of movie because it's basically, spoiler alert for a 40-year-old movie. But it's a young high school kind of nerd gets bit by a vampire, starts transitioning into a vampire, and it's a non-killing vampire. He meets an elder vampire who kind of leads him into the way of, oh, we have a deal with a late night butcher, and this is how you get through, getting through a day and a night and all this stuff. But then his parents think that he is in the process of coming out, and he is, but he's coming out of the coffin, not out of the closet. But it's a lot of fun. It's kind of weird and it's kind of uneven, but I think it's an obscure favorite.
I'm fully with Nathan on this. That was a staple of my childhood in the rental circuit when I would go pick up my weekend movies to go take to my dad's. My Best Friend and the Vampire was in there more than times than I could possibly count. I love that movie, but I think it's also more of a nostalgia thing. I agree with Nathan. It's not a perfectly balanced film. It's got weak points, but that's okay. It's a weird high school movie from the 80s. Like, they're not going to be perfect. Like, it's not John Hughes, so
No, and it has a lot of good ideas. Maybe it doesn't execute those ideas, but I appreciate it having those ideas. It
for sure
throws some stuff out there. The performance of David Warner is really great. He's a vampire hunter. He's kind of the antagonist. He's not really the bad guy per se, but he's definitely the antagonist. But it's great, and it's got a great, very iconic poster. The poster of the lockers, and then the locker in the center is a black coffin-shaped locker with tennis shoes in front of it, which I feel like is a really good representation of my personality. I think it's a lot of fun. I would definitely recommend people to seek it out. Yeah, it's not going to age well, and I'm sure that there's probably a couple of those jokes that don't land maybe quite the way that they were intended to at this point, but it's fun. I mean, if you're looking for a vampire theme, I mean, it really is. If John Hughes made a vampire movie, only he was not quite as good as John Hughes.
Yeah,
I
no,
enjoyed it.
But it's really fun. And just a shout out to Grimsdyke, who as the comedic sidekick to David Warner's Vampire Hunter, he's absurd and he's so much fun.
Yeah, it's kind of like a good Igor in a way.
Yeah. Good Igor. That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
I totally kept it. I kept it on like my rent again list just because that movie had me totally crushing on like Robert Sean Leonard. Like I was there for it. I was just like low key, just very much. He's so cute. He's so dreamy. He could bite me any day. Yeah, but you guys are right. That is like John Hughes meets a vampire film. But that kind of reminds me of the Jim Carrey one. What is that? Once Bitten.
Once Bitten.
Also dorky high school vampire film. I enjoyed that one.
But I enjoyed Once Bitten, but if you go back and watch that one's aged, that one's aged really rough. Really rough. There's a lot of intended humor in there that you look at it now and you're like, yeah, it's kind of fucked up, man.
That's kind of fucked up. I thought it was fun.
It's just aged worse than most.
I feel like most of the vampire films from the 80s and 90s that are on the obscure list, unless you watched it then, you're probably not going to get that humor from them because it was very much in context with what was going on.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely.
Around that time,
absolutely.
So.
Absolutely. You stuck a 15-year-old in front of that movie, he's going to be lost.
They're going to be like, God, you're so lame.
They're going to be like, this doesn't even, why did he say that? It's so offensive. Oh my God, I'm going on Twitter.
It's so offensive.
Cancel that.
I was watching Billy the Kid versus Dracula, and they've got that scene with the Native Americans, and they're like, the film back then, their perspective of what Native Americans are like. And I'm just like, holy shit, if anybody watches this from the younger generations, that's going to be exactly that as well. # cancel Billy the Kid.
I think he has been canceled. I think
a few times.
I think so. If not by bullets, by time.
Oh my God, Nathan!
I love it.
He's not wrong though.
I don't think you can cancel Billy the Kid any further. Really,
it's like people trying to cancel John Wayne. It's like, well, he's been dead for 40 years, so
he's already canceled.
Like the Grim Reaper canceled him. You got the ultimate cancel. Like, what else can you do?
Well, that's what I say for all these people who have watched 2 episodes of Dahmer who are very upset. I'm like, stick with it.
Stick with it. He'll get his, I promise.
I know how it ends. He's not with us anymore.
Stick with it.
That reminds me, and this has nothing to do with horror or anything at all, but back when Titanic came out, I remember walking out of the theater and somebody was saying something about the boat sinking, and somebody in line was like, thanks for ruining the fucking movie.
Are you kidding me?
Like, hello? Did you not study, like,
I think we all walked into that having it spoiled for us. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was just hilarious. I laughed my ass off and just walked away.
That's one of those. That's one of those. That's that's
I want somebody to go back to like a 30s newsreel and put spoiler alert at the beginning of it.
Yes.
Spoiler alert. This is what happens.
Oh
my gosh.
Yeah.
So I watched a weird one that Ashley kind of told me about because she knows how much I love Kevin Smith and Jason Mewes, and I did not like this fucking movie at all.
No, I know exactly what you're gonna say.
Yeah,
John.
Well, okay, so first, I can't get over Jay being Jay, so that part kind of sucked. Yes, he did good, but I don't know. It wasn't so much him in this movie. It was the other guy, the other ambulance driver. I can't stand that fucking guy. I wanted to kill him the whole fucking movie. I was like, just shut up, dude. You're a piece of shit. But yeah, I don't know.
Like
That
he's a
he
piece
kind
of
of ruined
shit
it.
that came through.
Yeah, but he ruined the whole movie for me. Just I could not stand that fucking guy.
That movie is just.
What is the name of the movie?
Bitten.
Bitten.
Yeah.
Jason Mewes. It's a
the
fairly
hell's that
recent
shit?
one, I believe.
It's like
No.
2000 something.
2008.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, not recent.
It was in the post. It was in like the lull when Jay and Silent Bob weren't really being a
Yeah.
thing.
Nothing
He
else.
He was still on heroin, so he was taking any job he could.
Yep.
And yeah.
Jeez.
That movie's terrible. I don't know what to tell you. It's so freaking bad.
I was amused.
But amused. Sorry.
But
Uh-huh.
we can acknowledge that just because something is amusing, it doesn't mean it's good.
Yeah, you know
Right.
what though? I think
Right.
that there were good elements, and that's where
I
I would go to bat for that one. I think there were good elements in that film. There were some definite like what the fuck moments. Like I think they tried to go somewhere and land in a way that it just didn't land. But I think that whoever wrote it and filmed it, they had ideas, and they had ideas.
They had
that
ideas.
could have landed if they had maybe, I don't know, paired with someone a little bit more seasoned. But there were moments in that film kind of sprinkled throughout that I think is what kept me watching it, because of those moments that it's like, okay, that lands, that works, that's funny, that's charming, that's endearing. The thing that wasn't endearing for me was the vampire itself. So that's where that was the, I think, where it doesn't land for me, because you guys know I love my vampires. And
Yeah.
so if the vampire isn't working for me, it's like, well, then your whole fucking movie's kind of awkward. The character John's talking about is the only reason I think that movie did landed that's okay for me. Which is funny, we're on the opposite sides there, because you would think that I wouldn't like it being a female, because this dude was like very offensive in so many ways, but there's something about it that worked. Like we all know that guy, right?
We do all know that guy.
Yeah, that guy who's just like running his mouth and saying things that you're like, dude, shut the fuck up. But he's also that guy that says what we want to say, or says what we wish we could say in moments. So for me, I'm like, he has to be that guy. He's also that guy that comes through, that even though he's kind of shitty and rough around his personality, he comes through for you, and he has your back, and he looks out for you. So I didn't mind his character. I thought it worked. And out of all the characters, I think he probably was the most complex.
My only question about that character, I guess, if I had to like try to redeem something out of this movie, and I agree with you, he was the best part of the film because he was the only one trying to like just be like, do you not see how ridiculous the situation you are in
He's
is?
calling it like it is.
But why did that guy have to talk about how much he's shit? Every 5 seconds, he's talking about what the deuce he just dropped. Like,
Sorry,
who
but that's
came
the
up
only
with
part that I connected with.
See?
'Cause that's literally the only part I connected with.
I was just like, okay, dude, the bathroom jokes, like, why? Like, that's what I mean, though.
Yeah, I was gonna say once in a while it was okay, but like all the fucking time.
Literally, his walk-in for every scene was him just coming from taking a shit. Like, that's ridiculous.
I honestly don't know. I think that was just to help. I think that was low hanging fruit for the writer. Like, in terms of, we got to make this guy the most repulsive, so that when he is like redeeming himself or helping and coming through, like it makes it bigger. Out of all the solids and fluids that the human body excretes, he only picked one. We've got so many more options. Yeah, I wouldn't say out of like, if I were recommending people go watch a movie, I wouldn't list that as but I would say that it did entertain me. I did see some moments, I wouldn't say of redemption, but moments of entertainment in there, moments of story that says, hey, dude, filmmaker, writer, keep working on your craft. It didn't completely bomb for me in a way where I'd be like, maybe you should consider a different gig.
Okay.
I mean, I would definitely watch it again, but like,
yeah, that gets a once for me.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't watch it right away, but I would watch it again if I was bored and there was nothing else on, just because, again, Jason Mewes, but you know, that's just me.
I will say this. It's better than Vampires on Bikini Beach. So there's that.
Don't you know somebody who was in that?
Yeah, my friend Gabby. She was in it, but she was like 4.
Why is a 4-year-old in Vampires in Bikini Beach?
Because her mom was a lead singer in a thrash metal band, and she was on the soundtrack.
I wonder how they wrote a 4-year-old in.
Movie
See
magic,
vampires
baby.
in a big TV beat.
I don't know. I don't know how else to say it. Movie magic.
I mean, Bram Stoker's Dracula has young children in it. That's what Lucy's eating.
Oh, yeah,
Mhm.
that's fair.
Definitely not an obscure version, but the version of Lucy and Bram Stoker's Dracula was terrifying.
Yes.
She was horrifying looking.
I would also say that which is kind of a takeoff of it, which is a little more obscure, is the 79 Frank Langella Dracula, which is John Badham directed. It's based on the revival that Frank Langella was in on Broadway. It's got Laurence Olivier in it. It's got Donald Pleasance in it, which is much better. I just looked down and saw it right now. Just have to bring it up is Jack Palance in Dan Curtis's Dracula. Speaking of underrated and obscure vampire stuff, Dan Curtis of the vampire supernatural soap opera Dark Shadows spent some time in the late 70s, early 80s making terrible adaptations of horror films for TV, including Jack Palance's Dracula, and you should watch it to be believed because he's easily one of the worst cinematic Draculas. But the
If not the
Langella
worst.
version that came out right around the same time is very good, and I feel like there are honestly moments of the Francis Ford Coppola Dracula that share some similarity.
Absolutely.
And the Lucy scene is kind of one of those, except in the Langella version, undead Lucy is not attractive in the slightest. She almost looks like a zombie as a vampire. And then, Francis Ford Coppola Lucy, I'm like, you could take me instead of that kid,
Pick me.
It's okay.
I'm all right. No, guys, let me go. Guys, I got it. I'll take this
She
one.
already- she already had like 3 suitors that were willing to bleed for her.
That's fine. I'll fight all 3. Come on, Sadie Frost. Let's go.
One of them
Fight all
being
3.
Wesley, the Princess Bride. No, sorry.
Carry
I
on.
guess he wasn't the Princess Bride. I guess he was the Dread Pirate Roberts. But in
No,
my
but-
mind, Wesley was the Princess Bride.
That Lucy scene in the 79 Dracula truly is a really great example of when vampires are scary.
Yes.
Like her dad's there and he's like freezing up and she just looks mortifying and like they just, oh man, it's
She is
icky.
of the grave. They have to go through the grave to get to her. I mean, this is a dead thing. And man, we haven't really talked about this, but I like scary vampires. I think that sexy vampires are great, and I think that it's good when you can combine the two, and I think that's why a lot of us love Bram Stoker's Dracula so much, because I think that that's maybe one of the strongest parts of that film is how they kind of mix the sexy with the scary.
Yeah.
And it wasn't too much of one or the other, to be quite honest, at least for me. But yeah, some of these vampires, I mean, like they're horrifying. Like Lucy from that movie is horrifying. We haven't talked about this obscure movie, and I don't want to jump around too much, but like the vampire from Night Flyer,
Yes.
Night Flyer.
Mhm.
What a crazy looking fucking vampire! It's like wow.
The singular tusk fang just like that's, oh man, yes, so good.
I like the cat.
I was gonna say, how did that go again?
Just no, I mean, but like if like his mouth like extends to like 5 times its normal size, and then he has this one
Just the one down the
tusk,
center. Yeah.
Yep.
and it just looks like, I mean, he's just coated in blood and like he's got the Dracula costume on, but he looks mortifying. It's wonderful.
He's got the one at the bottom too. It's just not as long, but it's also
yeah,
like
no,
the
he does.
triangle at
You're
the
right.
bottom.
You're right.
I mean,
Right,
it's still
he
a good
does.
size.
It's like 2 fingernails.
Yeah, he's got the pincher.
Yeah.
It's like
Picture.
it's like vertical pincers. Like if a spider had a vertical mouth.
I like, a lot of people don't
Gnarly.
like the Night Flyer, but I liked
Oh,
it.
dude, no, such a good
I enjoyed it. So
Such a good movie. Yeah, I mean, I have a whole podcast dedicated to Stephen King, so
This
I'm a
is
huge
true.
Stephen King fan. But
you're one of the Derry's dead kids.
yeah, I'm one of Derry's dead kids. But even beyond that, like The Night Flyer as a short story, as the feature film, it's just such a different take, even from King's own takes on vampires before it.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a different concept, and like it being set in an airport with a flying, like a single engine plane being a coffin. Like it's just really interesting, high concept that actually does pay off. You know what I mean? Rather than some things that we've talked about today where they went for it and it didn't pay off. Like I think everything in that movie really does hit on all cylinders.
I think that anybody that doesn't like the paparazzi would enjoy that film. No, I'm kidding.
You're right, though. You're right, though. The protagonist is an ass.
He's
a complete jerk. So, because that movie doesn't really have a hero. You know what I mean? It's got an asshole because he has to be an asshole, and it's got an asshole because he wants to be an asshole. And I think when you get to the end of that movie, you don't exactly know who you're rooting for, and I love that. I love that concept.
You don't know who you're rooting for. I knew who I was rooting for, and it was the asshole that has to be one.
Yeah.
With the pincher clause.
I generally think that most of us were rooting for him.
Yeah. I like Nathan just pincher. Now every time I see you guys, that's gonna be my salute.
Oh, that's our little obscure vampire salute.
Yay. Although I don't think I can open my jaw as wide as that.
He went for it, man. Like
Nathan, don't give me that look.
Thank you. I was thinking the same thing, Nathan.
He's
There's a joke in there, and I shouldn't go there, but
I was
We're
trying
all
not
saying
I was,
a lot of things here. I'm just.
You know what?
love you, Ashley.
I can't dislocate my jaw, boys. Glad you have faith in me, but I cannot do what he did.
Many things Ashley can do, but that is not one of them.
what do we got?
Blood for Dracula. Ooh.
Yes, this is also known as Andy Warhol's Dracula. This was a pair of two movies with Flesh for Frankenstein, aka Andy Warhol's Frankenstein. There were two films produced by Warhol, but actually directed by Paul Morrissey. They both star the incomparable Udo Kier. That you may know from anything from Blade, another vampire film, to My Own Private Idaho, to if you're a horror fan, you know Udo Kier. But Udo Kier, he's in Suspiria. He's a very thankless role in the original Suspiria. But this movie's a great movie. I would say that it's a little less obscure now because Severin just put out a beautiful edition of it, and both of those films ended up on Shudder for a while. I think they're still on Shudder, but they're great, and they're great takes on the story. And Udo's Dracula is especially interesting because they play him very effete, and they really he goes in on his own German accent and talks a lot about the blood of the virgins. And it's all about kind of sexual revolution and mores, because basically Dracula leaves Transylvania to go find more virgins. He's run out of virgin blood, and non-virgin blood makes him vomit blood copiously. And he moves on to Italy to, find the nice Catholic girls that are all, of course, very sexually promiscuous, and so it doesn't end up very happy for our Dracula in this film. But it's kooky and weird and gory and bloody and sexy, but also very campy, but in a very purposeful way.
Yeah, I find funny is Udo is in Dracula 3000. He's the captain of the ship, and he's actually fighting Dracula. So
you want to talk about obscure vampire films that never should have existed?
That was not a good one.
Yeah,
now Dracula 3000 is definitely one of those that should never have happened.
He just couldn't get enough of the Dracula world, apparently.
And again, spoiler alert for a 20-some-year-old movie, Dracula 2000, where they purpose that Dracula is Judas.
I liked that.
Interesting.
Brilliant.
I don't know if I would call it a good movie, but I would definitely call it an interesting movie.
I like that they
the concept. The concept is brilliant.
Yes.
The execution of that concept,
debatable,
but smart ideas or neat ideas, at least.
Yes.
Very, 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 very cool ideas that felt very much like it made a lot of the mistakes that early 2000s horror films in general made. Not the best, but great stuff. Great stuff happening in the film.
I liked Dracula 2000's concept. I thought they were trying to be too hip. And so they were focusing a little bit more on that than actually really, if they had just stuck with the storyline and really pushed that more, it would have been everything they wanted probably. But they were so focused on being like, wasn't it like a big scene in Virgin Records? And it's just like, they were trying to be too hip, and
that's Virgin Records. By the way.
And they were trying way too hard. But I enjoyed Dracula 2000's concept with that being Judas. Whatever, spoiler alert, I don't care. I thought though was it Gerard? I thought he did great as Dracula. / Judas, especially when it's showing like the flashbacks of him as Judas. Like, I think that he was not as well known at that point in time, which is why they cast him as this like super sexy, mysterious Dracula. And I thought he sold it as a sexy vampire, but he also showed some glints of what he could be when he was doing his Judas flashbacks. I was like, hey, this guy might be more than just this flashy vampire they're trying to make. He's got some ability to emote there. So
Yeah, we should put him in the film version of the musical Family Opera and have him ruin it. Boo, Gerard, boo.
You stop it.
No.
We're talking about Dracula.
Well, okay. Well, then we'll say this. Interesting Dracula that I think is underrated, but is a modern thing that is available to you right now if you have Netflix, is the 2020 made for Netflix Dracula. Is a 3-part series. It's from the people who did the Sherlock Holmes series. It's 3 90-minute episodes, and it's really one of the most interesting takes on Dracula that I've ever seen. I don't know if it always works. The first 2 episodes are really good. The third one has really good ideas that I don't think, again, fully get executed the way that it should. But the interactions between Dracula and Van Helsing, which is a really interesting take on the Van Helsing character, and I won't spoil it for anybody who hasn't seen it, is very good. It's a Dracula film that is as strong in dialogue as it is in action. Again, it's very interesting because it has to do with Dracula coming to the New World, and then the one halfway spoiler I will have, it goes from Dracula times to modern times. And it's pretty interesting in that result.
That's cool. I just noticed that it's got 2 of the writers from Doctor Who and, like you said, Sherlock as well.
Yes.
So
it's a BBC production. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll definitely check that out because I'm a big Doctor Who person. So, yeah.
And I'm piggybacking off of that. Claes Bang as Dracula is probably the best casting of Dracula, right behind Gary Oldman, in my opinion. His Dracula is loving everything he's doing. He is having so much fun being an absolute monster, and it's fantastic. It's fantastic. It's so much good. It's so much fun watching him.
It's very strange because he is a Danish man with kind of an English accent, but they play with that and they actually talk about why he doesn't have a Transylvanian accent in the film. But I have to look this up just because I wanted to get his name totally right. We're talking about Ultimate Draculas, not an obscure movie, definitely not an underrated movie, but an underrated Dracula is Duncan Rager from Monster Squad.
Oh my God, yes.
We all love Monster Squad. Monster Squad's the great blend of serious fun and just slapstick. It's Goonies for the monster kids, but man, his Dracula is, he's in my top 5 Draculas. He might be, even if he's not my favorite Dracula, he might be the most ultimate Dracula.
Who's your favorite Dracula?
It's Duncan from Monster Squad. But don't tell Bella, because maybe Bella, but one of those two.
I think maybe Bella.
Maybe Bella. No one gives 2 fucks for Bella. I give 2 fucks for both. I give 2 fucks for Bella, and I am gay for Mole Man. All right, that's just
fair.
No one's gay for Mole Man. Anyway,
I did watch because I was just curious what's out there right now. If you type in vampires, right? Because I have no idea what the fuck's out there. So I typed in vampires in the different streaming services to see what popped up. That's how I stumbled across Bitten. That's just random stuff that I came across. But I did stumble across Vampires versus the Bronx. And
oh, yeah. That came out a couple of years ago.
Yeah. And I will say I loved that. I will watch that again and again and again. And I know John shakes his head. But for me, it captured today what the Lost Boys captured back then. I'm not saying they are equal, because Lost Boys is always going to win for me. But they were able to have the vampires that are charming, but then the vampires that look scary when they're actually vamped out. But it has your 3 protagonists who are kids right? They're like Goonies trying to make shit happen. But it threw in cultural flair too, because a lot of cultures out there in America, specifically, we don't have a lot of those, right? Protagonists that kind of speak to us in terms of Goonies level. And you have these 3 kids who are mixed, different cultural backgrounds. And it's funny to see how their religion played into what they're doing, how their parents' responses based on their different religions played into their actions, and how they're like, fuck it, I'm going to do it anyways. And like the shenanigans that they stumbled into just by thinking they could figure it out. And you have like Method Man playing like a priest. So that was even funnier. Because all I could think is like, how are you a priest? Even when he's like, oh shit, they stole my Sprite. I thought it was a fun movie, and it's been a while since I've watched a vampire movie, especially anything that isn't already older, right? That's nostalgic, and said, boy, that was fun. And I had fun with that one. So I wouldn't say it's like 30 years from now, it's going to be the Lost Boys memory, but it was fun. I had fun with it, and I would totally watch it again, and I would recommend people watch it. I think it's a good, fun one. It's a good gateway vampire film.
It just occurred to me that we're on a horror podcast and we're talking about obscure vampire films, and we haven't talked about Martin.
Yeah, right.
I can only imagine somebody like all of us listening to this being like, "You fools! What are you doing? You fools!" Yeah, Martin, great, held in distribution limbo right now in America by Richard Rubenstein, but Martin is a great vampire film by George Romero. It's an interesting take on the vampire's tale. I think it's very interesting because you never know. Well, first of all, Martin isn't really a vampire, but maybe he is, but probably not. And the fantasy sequences in that film where it goes from color to black and white are amazing. It has amazing things to do about what we think of vampires and what we think about vampires as seducers. Because when Martin sees himself as the vampire, it's black and white, it's romantic, it's these scenes of seduction and the chase and all of this. But then you watch what really is happening, and he's assaulting these poor women. And then he is ultimately victim of his uncle's religious fervor, which is an interesting discussion because his uncle is kind of a nut, but his uncle also stops the monster. So who's right, who's wrong, all of that. But it's a very interesting film. Hard to find in America, but if you can find it and watch it. Really great lead performance by John Amplas as Martin, who you would know as the nice scientist in Day of the Dead.
You get a little cameo from Romero too. His Father Howard.
You do?
Yeah. Martin is actually my favorite George Romero film. I know there's probably a lot of zombie fans out there that just went, "Oh God, what did you just say?" To me, it's the film that he always is making people ask questions, right? Like that's always his thing. Social commentary. Usually with the zombie films, he's tackling human issues. Mm-hmm. In Martin, it feels like he's tackling more moral, spiritual issues, like questions of yourself, which I think are like more personal, and it's a more solid, like more singular focused piece in that regard. Like it's making you question things about yourself and like how you feel toward the end. Like you were saying, between the uncle and Martin himself, like who's the good guy, who's the bad guy, and your own moral quandaries with religion, which there's a lot of subtext in that movie with that. I personally think that as far as like execution of like his thought-provoking kind of style, I think it's his best work. There's like 8 copies in the whole country, but if you can find one, you know.
I mean, a lot of people who would say, oh my gosh, I can't believe you would say this over the zombies. Like, I think a lot of people forget that George Romero's inspiration for zombies in the first place was vampires. So the fact that he would do a vampire film makes sense, right? Because that was his initial inspiration to even make the zombies. So I agree with you. Martin's a good one, but no idea where to watch it.
Why we have Stephen King and Romero together, because they were initially paired to do Salem's Lot. That didn't happen. And then from that, we got Creepshow, which is a wonderful thing.
It's a wonderful thing.
A wonderful thing. So yay vampires, and yay Romero.
Yay Romero. I love, by the way, just a side note, Nathan, that you came to the table with a stack of DVDs.
Oh, yeah. And we didn't even get...
You're just holding them up.
My copy of Blood and Donuts here.
Oh, my God. I love Blood and Donuts.
Canadian comedy. We've got an Ashley favorite, Central Park Drifter. I was
Also
thinking
known as
as-
Graveyard Shift.
Oh my God, Graveyard Shift. So, can I tell you how much that frustrated me? Because I watched Graveyard Shift as Graveyard Shift because that's what it was when I got it at Blockbuster. Decades later, I'm trying to find it, and everything coming up is just that's not what's coming up. It's the Stephen King one. And so I'm trying to find it, and it took me forever to figure out that it was now, everywhere. It was being listed as Central Park Drifter versus the Graveyard Shift that I'd seen at Blockbuster. So love that one. Awful, lovely movie.
Awful. Yep. Lamora, A Child's Tale of the Supernatural, is a very underrated 70s vampire film. Borrows a little more of like Carmela and that sort of angle. And a not so good one to look up that's just a lot of fun is Zoltan, Hound of Dracula, also known as Dracula's Dog, where they put fake vampire teeth into the mouth of a Doberman Pinscher and then shone a flashlight on his eyes to make it glow. Not a great film, but
Just
a film that was featured definitely on the Sammy Terry show. If it's good enough for Indiana's own horror host, it's good enough for you. So check out Dracula's Dog.
I'm actually going to go deep into the 70s for mine. The Night Stalker, the original film of the Night Stalker, before they kicked off the Kolchak the Night Stalker series, the movie The Night Stalker. It was made for TV. Very 70s, very TV, but there's some kind of charm to it that's just, it's interesting. It's interesting. It's a very objective kind of piece. It's not a very personal movie. Kolchak's a reporter and he does his thing and he's just trying to figure out what's going on with this supposed vampire. And it's set in Las Vegas. It's just really, it's a different kind of vibe. Like seeing a vampire film set in the middle of the desert, it's a really interesting thing. And everybody should check that out.
So I am going to agree with Nathan. Blood and Donuts is on my list. Central Park Drifter, awful but sexy on my list. Part 1, not part 2. I will say that out of the vampire genre, like we just barely touched on like obscure vampire films out there. There's so many, and there's a vampire film for everybody out there, depending what you're looking for. You want your mean, ugly vampires, you're going to get them. You want your sexy, erotic vampires, they're out there too. So if you like vampires, there's a film for you, my friend. And if you don't like vampires, we can't be friends. As Nathan shakes his head, nope. So.
If you don't like vampires, you suck.
You don't like vampires, bite me. No.
There's a lot at stake here.
Oh, no. I love it.
Fantastic.
Yes. What about you, John?
I did watch one other one that came up when I typed in vampires on, I think it was Amazon. It was called Suck. Just Suck. So I'm like, all right, this is whatever.
Are you sure you were on Amazon?
Yes, it wasn't. It was not that kind of a movie.
Did it say Brazzers in the corner?
Yeah, no, that was on the other one. I'm sure.
Okay.
But no, it's about this band and they suck and they're trying to make it in Canada and doing this tour, and their bass player is a chick, and in walks this vampire. He's the creepiest looking fucking thing I've ever seen.
Iggy Pop's in there.
Yeah, they're all in there. Alice Cooper. So Alice Cooper was who I thought at first, which this guy did not look like at all. He comes in and he bites her. So the band starts getting, noticed more and more because now she's hot and blah, blah, blah. And it's weird. It's got Iggy Pop in there. It's got freaking Malcolm McDowell as Van Helsing. Moby's in there. Henry Rollins. All kinds of weird cameos. It's a weird movie, but it was actually kind of funny and stupid just to watch for just a night for whatever.
Well, guys, this has been fun. I appreciate you coming on to the podcast to talk about vampires with me. I love the vampires. I love the sexy vampires. I love the mean vampires. I just love vampires. And there's probably a psychology out there of why I like vampires, but I don't give a fuck to know why. I just like them. So thank you for geeking out on it with me. I know you guys love on the vampires with me, so it's always a special day when I get to geek out on movies with you guys.
Yeah.
Do you guys have any projects you'd like to shout out to before we finish it up?
As some people may know or may not know, we are embarking on the endeavor of making our first feature film right now called Abigail, which amazingly, how fitting for the theme, it's a vampire movie. And it's a big, scary thing. Ashley is actually read the script and she loves it. And so people are really excited. I'm really excited. We're trying to crowdfund right now and raise some money so that we can give this thing the best that it possibly can. And if anybody out there was interested, go check it out at It Came From the 508 Productions on Facebook, which is where the link will be.
Yeah, and the first thing I'm going to promote is his movie. So do that. Go fund that movie because we need more independent vampire films from crazy people who have awesome taste in vampire films. Also, you can always find me at sammyterry.com, where I work with the world's longest running horror host, Sammy Terry, right out of here in the darkest depths of Indianapolis, Indiana. We are celebrating our 60th anniversary this year. You can always check out our Facebook page because we're doing some 60th anniversary stuff all spooky season long. So yeah, check us out, sammyterry.com or the Sammy Terry fan page on Facebook.
Yay. Thank you guys. Thank you again for being on the podcast. We appreciate you so much.
I'm so happy you brought us on. Thank you.
Blah. My vampire noise.
Blah. You pinch your teeth.
One more shout out. Dracula Dead and Loving It. Leslie Nielsen.
Amen.
I rescind everything on this podcast. Refuse to be seen.
All right, John, bring us home.
All right. Thank you again to James and Nathan for popping on this episode. It's absolute blast when you guys are on here. And I know we can go on for hours and hours and hours. And for
That's
our
what she
listeners,
said.
Thank you to our listeners for listening to this episode of 3Haunted Podcast with your host. I'm John Thomas.
I am Ashley Lunar Goddess.
And if you have any questions, comments, or episode suggestions, please feel free to email us at 3hauntedpodcast@gmail.com. And if you haven't done so already, please like, follow, and subscribe to all of our social media. You don't want to miss one crazy moment.
Until next time.